Okay, it is Tuesday, November the 24th. It is 8:31 p.m. and my name is Richard Wright, and as you know, I am your professor for drugs and crime, and welcome to week three. Week three already, and as we approach and prepare for this week of Thanksgiving, uh, let us also recognize and continue to keep our minds focused on staying safe, and hopefully you're following the guidelines of the CDC for your protection, uh, and listening very carefully to the scientists and doctors. And so we're going to spend roughly the next hour or so going over information to prepare you for this week. So let's get right into sharing my screen. Okay, that is not what I want to share. So let's go back. Okay, let's go back to okay, let's go back to okay. Let's go back to stop sharing. Stop sharing. Okay. And let's go back and share my screen. I think we got it now. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Okay, guys, again, let's get down to where we are today. This is week number 3. We have 3 more lectures to go, so this is the midway point. And you should also know that this is also the week that your quizzes will count. And we'll talk about that as one of your assignments in just a few minutes. And there's recordings for week 2. Week 3 will be placed in here after that. Let's take a look at the course calendar. And here we are. This was week 1. This is week 2. This is week 3 that started yesterday. And one of the first things I want to announce to you is those of you who turned in your written assignments from week 2 on yesterday, they will not be considered as late. And the reason being is because we got a message from leadership that the Blackboard module was not available for the entire 22nd. It went down sometime in the evening, and I received emails from students telling me that they submitted their assignments late, which is no problem. Even if it does say late on there, the actual date that's due would have been yesterday, the 23rd, at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. I will still give you credit for the discussion reply post if it was submitted on the 23rd by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, and you lose only 1 point for that as well. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that up front. Okay. So don't get comfortable with that, because next week's assignment, unless there are some other problems, will be due, at least week 3's will be due on the 29th. So your initial post is due tonight. What type of homicide is this? Okay. And then your live lecture Then your reply post is due Saturday, the 28th. And then your written assignment, spousal rape, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And then your quiz, which is timed. Remember, this is like a midterm for you guys in this class. And remember, I told you how to prepare, going over those practice sessions at the end of each week's lecture. And you need to go back and review those, look at your PowerPoints. And if you have time, go back and listen to the lectures. But primarily, the most important things to focus on are those additional materials that the practice quizzes from weeks 1 and 2 and this week, and also those interactive activities at the end as well. And then, of course, your PowerPoints. Keep in mind that when you do take this test, it is a closed book test. It is a closed book test. You are not supposed to have your books open. It is a closed book test, and it is very important for you to remember that, because otherwise you violate the academic integrity policy. Okay? So now you've seen that. Let's go back to the course home, and let's take a look at the recording. Let's look at the announcement for week 3. Okay. The announcement for week 3 says that we're going to deal with crimes against persons. As you remember, last week we discussed crimes against property. And I indicated last week to you that crimes against persons are more severely punished because we value and treasure life and individuals over property. And we do value property, but it's secondary. And so to prepare for this week, I've sent you the PowerPoint for chapters 4, 5, and 6 of the textbook. And you have that information to help you to study. And then the activities: homicide, battery, domestic violence, sexual assault crimes. And then we'll end with dealing with key terms for practice: special circumstances, homicide, classification quiz. And so this is a reminder that our lecture is taking place, as we do on every Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard. And your discussion assignment is due tonight. For your initial post, what type of homicide is this? And that's due. And then your reply post, of course, for the same topic, what type of homicide is this, is due Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Finally, you have basically 2 written assignments. One, spousal rape, and we're going to discuss the requirements for that, and the quiz, which is timed. Okay. I do want to remind you that when you complete these written assignments specifically, that you make sure that you look at the module requirements and the PowerPoints, and that and then listen to what I say during the lectures about the assignments. As I graded the assignments for week 1 rather, and you saw that I'll be grading week 2 before the end of the day, Friday. You discover that you have to make sure that you satisfy the paging requirements. Many of you did not complete one page for each of those 3 scenarios from week 1, and you lost points because I said this during the lecture that it is important for you to have provided details adequate enough to cover 1 page, and that the total page content for the assignment should have been 3 pages, not counting the page for cover page and the reference page. And very, 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 very important. Most of your papers didn't have Grammarly problems, so I ran them through Grammarly. But one of the most common offenses, and I said also you needed to have citations in the body for each of the scenarios. And then I also recommended that you separate the scenarios. Some of you did pretty well with that. You started page 1, scenario 1, and then you finished that, and then you went to scenario 2, then you went to scenario 3. But it was very important for you to also have details that equal 1 page for each of those 3 scenarios. And if you didn't, you saw my comments about that. And as I said before, the reason why we have the page content requirement is because we have determined that in order to do justice to the assignment and provide adequate details to satisfy the requirements of the assignment, that's why we require those pages. So some of you may lose points, may have good seen scenario 1, scenario 2, and then you finished not so good and you lost points for that. And then, as I said, citations in the body and then references at the end. Remember, I did say you only had to have 1 reference page, and that was it. So that's a key. So I've already talked about, and so as far as the quiz is concerned, we'll talk about that in a minute, some more, even though I just told you about it. Finish, continue to be strong, and finish strong. And then adversity as a springboard to success. I'm still working on putting that second video together for you to tell you about myself, so you can get that. Okay. So now let's go into module 3, and let's take a look at the information here. So the discussion post, you're going to use this scenario here, and then you're going to, as the investigating officer, what criminal charge would you recommend against James? 1st-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, or manslaughter. Explain which criminal law is most applicable to this case and why the officers are not. So you're going to do that in your initial post, and then consider 3 potential criminal charges in this case contrasted with yours from another, and respond. Remember, excuse me, remember the fact that we have this guides in here. If you click on that, again, it's very helpful to you and will give you the opportunity and ability to be able to see how your assignments are completed in this class. This is about discussion posts, and so you can deal with weekly assignments. You can also deal with the Grammarly issue, set up tutoring if you need it, APA, brush up on it, the library to use, online library, finding cases and statutes. But I also told you that if you want to find cases, you could go to FastCase. And FastCase involves cases, statutes, regulations from all 50 states, as well as federal coverage. So that's a resource that one of my students brought to my attention that you can use also. So make sure you consider that in your written assignments. So now let's talk about spousal rape. So this is a two-part assignment. Now, remember to attach two files. Now, and that the first part of your written assignment is to examine the types of crimes committed. So you'll look at this scenario and write a short paper addressing this scenario. Now, it's a minimum of 2 pages. APA, which you should know what that means, all right? List the elements of the offenses and explain how they have been met, which means you have to do some research. I told you where you can find some of that information. Explain what type of crimes have been committed. Be sure to explain why the initial responding officer mishandled the case for the first time. And then cite the sources. Cite the sources. Try to minimize using the textbook, but I want you to use outside sources. And you have methods that I just shared with you as to how to find those sources. Include a reference page, and then APA citation in the body, and other requirements like the cover page. And as I say, be sure to cite the sources. Very, very, very important. Then the second part is conduct the interview. Now, in the interview, you're dealing with this scenario here, and complete this in a minimum of 1 page. 1 page. Please be sure to separate parts 1 from part 2 clearly for me. I don't want to have to read through the paper to figure out where you started part 2. And in part 2, you're going to explain how you approach the interview with Jackie. Explain that. And what sensitive questions will you ask in that? Do that in essay form. And then if you have sources, cite those sources again. Again, there's the guide here to help you that I just shared with you. And it tells you all the things that, and it must be a Word document and not a PDF. So now to look at the rubric, click on the assignment. You see the due date, and then click on view the rubric. And it tells you part 1. And I already told you the details. List the elements, explain the types of crimes, and then determine whether why the responding officer mishandled the case, and make sure that you satisfy this 2-page minimum requirement. Otherwise, you will lose points. All right. The second part is dealing with the interview. And then, of course, the rest of this deals with the paragraphs. Remember, both are double-spaced. And make sure grammar, spelling, and then make sure APA, and no Wikipedia or generic sources to be used, for a total of 40 points. All right. Any questions about the written assignment? You can type in the chat box if you have a question. I will see it. Okay, so I'm going to assume that there are none. So now let's go and let's look at the quiz, which we're not going to look at the quiz. Thought you was going to see the quiz. Nope. I'm just reminding you about the quiz. Contains multiple choice questions. It is a 30-minute quiz. Do not ask me how many questions, but you should be able to figure that out from how, well, you might not know it from here, but they usually make sure you have enough time to be able to do the number of questions. And you'll have one opportunity. And during the exam, you'll be noted when you have 5 minutes, 1 minute, and 30 seconds. Once the time expires, the grade will automatically be submitted. All right. So now remember one thing: how to prepare. I've told you before, and I'll say it again one last time. Use the practice quizzes. Use the practice interactive activities for each of the modules that we have covered so far. I told you particularly pay close attention to the quiz questions because they have a way of showing up on the quiz itself. And that's all I'm going to tell you. Remember, it is closed book because you're agreeing to abide by the academic misconduct policy set forth in the course syllabus. And if you remember in the academic integrity video, it says that when you take quizzes or tests, that you should only utilize sources that have been authorized by your professor. And since you recognize that it is a closed book session, I have not authorized you to use any materials, none of them. You're just going to study, and as you would do if you were physically in class, you're going to put your material away, take the quiz, provide the answers within the time that is given. And then, of course, your live classroom lecture, word or phrase that I give you. Some people try to anticipate it. Don't try to anticipate it because it might not always follow the same mode that I did the week before. I will give it to you at some point during this lecture. So that's it for the assignments. Any questions about the assignments? Type in the chat box if you do. No questions? Okay. All right, that means you're all good. All right, so now let's get to the material itself. Let's talk about these crimes against persons. So we're going to start with homicide, then we're going to deal with battery, domestic violence, sexual assault crimes is what we're going to conclude with in terms of the topic. And then we'll go over these key terms, few of these, and then your quiz, practice quiz. We already did the discussion, written assignment quiz, and live lecture. So let's get right to it. So first of all, homicide involves a death. It must involve a death, not a near death. In order for it to be a homicide, it must be the killing of a person. And the killing can either be lawful, if it is based upon justification, such as maybe self-defense or stand your ground, depending on the jurisdictions that you're in, or if you are a professional law enforcement individual or authorized to utilize a weapon, if you do so with the necessary force to deal with the individual's force that they put up against you. For example, if a person raises their hand, you can't take out your gun and shoot them. If they have a knife, on the other hand, then it has to be a dangerous weapon, knife, not a butter knife or something like that. But then, so when police officers use deadly force to prevent great bodily harm, it's considered as lawful or justifiable. Again, the citizenry has the self-defense or the stand your ground laws to fall back on. Okay. So on the other hand, it says here that when an upset boyfriend intentionally kills his girlfriend because he believes that she cheated on him, it's unlawful and could be referred to as murder. And this upset boyfriend thing could end up taking it into the heat of passion, which means that it could end up being what we call involuntary manslaughter or voluntary manslaughter, should I say, or second-degree murder. Usually those are interchangeable depending on jurisdictions, as you'll discover from your reading. So murder is the unlawful killing of another person, and we're going to just briefly deal with some of these. So what is first-degree murder? First-degree murder, very simply, is determined by the statutes in the jurisdictions that you're in. However, though, it generally involves premeditation, or as we call a forethought or planning, and an intent to actually kill that person. And that is usually adequate enough to the premeditation before the act is usually adequate enough to turn it into murder. And it says this is a typical example: causing the death of another human being, premeditation and intent to kill that person. In other words, that was your plan to do so. So it must be demonstrated that the killer had intent. Now, intent can be demonstrated by the actions as well as this thing here, your mouth, speaking the words. And as it says, sometimes the intent is obvious. For example, if the killer is witnessed screaming to a person or saying, I'm going to kill you or you're going to die, and then fires a gun at the victim, it's clear that the act was intentional as opposed to accidental. Motive could also be determined to show that the killer intended. For example, in this statement here, it says you did an email or put out something on social media that you intend to kill a victim to collect some insurance money, or you intend on killing that individual, and then it can support the elements of first-degree murder because your written statements followed by the action carried out could catapult the act into first-degree murder. So remember, it's with malice and a forethought. That's pretty much a summary of it, okay? Second-degree murder, on the other hand, is lesser degree, and premeditation is not necessary. And an example is Colorado, that the defendant on or about a date charged knowingly caused the death of another person. Now, the element of second degree does not require premeditation, but includes the intentional killing of another. So again, as I said, second degree murder is also synonymous in some jurisdictions as voluntary manslaughter. They're the exact same thing. So it says when the killing is done without any prior intent, but occurs in the heat of passion. So that's why I made the statement earlier about the murder that of the boyfriend killing the girl, believing that he was upset that she was cheating on him, considered as murder, but it could end up as second degree or voluntary manslaughter. Heat of passion heat of passion is the key, where you basically are so upset that you lose control. You're not even thinking about the possible consequences, and it applies, and the sentencing is less for, of course, second-degree murder. It says heat of passion killings are applied in murder cases when the murder happens immediately in the moment. So it has to be like right at the time, not you talk to somebody and then you come over to them. No, but if you're in their vicinity and then you're upset, then in that case, it could end up being as a irresistible impulse. Now, if you have a gun on that person and then you get upset with them while you have the gun on them, then that's not going to be second degree. It's probably going to be murder, because you have the weapon, which is a dangerous weapon that you threaten that individual with. And so as a result, that individual could then be the victim of first degree murder as opposed to heat of passion. Okay. So heat of passion killings, when it happens after the moment, irresistible impulse, it would be difficult to lessen the severity of murder, as it says under this concept. If Bob came home to find his wife in bed with Jim, but then hunted Jim down the next day, if he killed them at that time while he was, under the impulse of the scene that was not something good to see, then it is probably very likely that he would be charged successfully with second degree murder or voluntary, not involuntary, but voluntary. Make sure you understand what voluntary as opposed to involuntary. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. It's a big difference. So anyway, remember, manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter is second degree murder. The intentional or knowing killing in a heat of passion produced by adequate provocation sufficient to lead a reasonable person to act irrationally. That's what, in other words, leading that individual to have lost control. So remember that. So remember the difference in the two. Premeditation and a forethought. But premeditation missing, it's going to end up being second degree murder in most cases. Special circumstances. Now, it depends on these situations, and you need to be aware of them to a point. Is that for first degree special circumstances, there has to be some aggravated factors involved to elevate it and take it to death penalty. Now, this is, of course, in a jurisdiction where the death penalty does exist. My state, Illinois, no longer has the death penalty. And just a reminder to you, the Supreme Court decided in Furman versus Georgia, a 1972 Supreme Court case, that the death penalty was cruel and unusual punishment. But after that, I forget the name of the case that came after that, that decided that the death penalty was legal and that you had to go through certain processes before you could execute an individual. Then in that case, then the death penalty is applicable, and each state was given the responsibility to satisfy the requirements for before issuing the death penalty to someone, to go through those due process steps before that. But anyway, I just threw that in because the fact that I want you to be aware that this would only apply in a jurisdiction where there is the death penalty. Now, so here, and if you'll notice, it gets to be more egregious, because here are the 2 points. Future dangerousness, the probability that the defendant would commit crimes that would constitute continuing threat to society. So in other words, you're a dangerous criminal. Secondly, that it was wanton, torturous, terrible, inhumane actions that it indicates that the individual's mind was depraved at the time of the offense, or an aggravated battery. That is, that you use something that, not just a battery, but that you use some kind of weapon to mutilate that individual or things of that nature, to kill them. You tortured them. That's basically what it means. So if neither of the aggravating factors are present in a first-degree homicide case in Virginia, according to the statute, then you could be sentenced to life and not death. So what I'm saying is that this would apply to the sentencing aspect of the crime itself. Second-degree special circumstances have two common circumstances of the element of knowing, and that is adequate. Now remember, two circumstances that make up knowing in second-degree murder: adequate provocation. This occurs when circumstances exist that a person may deprive a person of reasonable self-control. Like, for example, Bob comes home and finds Jim in the bed with Bob comes home and finds Jim in the bed with his wife, and Bob shoots and kills Jim. Bob would probably argue that he lost control and argue adequate provocation in these instances, and have it be charged with second degree as opposed to first degree murder. So this is an argument that the defense would want to make. Coercion or necessity, that the death was because the person was forced to commit it. For example, if Jack is taken hostage with a hostage taker and has a gun through his head, and the hostage taker tells Jack, "Shoot Bob or I'll kill you myself." Under those circumstances, Jack shoots Bob. Well, he can argue coercion, that he was forced to, and use that as an affirmative defense, like self-defense, or those kinds of things. Okay. All right, so that's what you pretty much need to know there, that special circumstances in second degree pretty much are raised by the defense. Okay. All right. Involuntary manslaughter. So we're going to conclude this section dealing with involuntary manslaughter. So there's no need for provocation or malice of forethought, but basically something done recklessly. One of the most common ways that involuntary manslaughter cases come about is driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and or speeding recklessly, and resulting in the death of another. So their actions either had utter disregard or utter indifference for human life, and so such as the example that's given in the bottom here. We'll talk about that. To impress somebody, you do something crazy and it results in their death or some other party's death. So basically, is in contrast to reckless, simply means to be indifferent to the welfare of the individual. In other words, you don't even think about it in terms. So which degree of involuntary manslaughter? And so let's look at this scenario here, which kind of like lays it out. So let me preface that, though, is that the defendant didn't intend to kill anyone, but because of their reckless, carelessness actions, a person is killed. Okay? Drinking and driving is reckless. Okay? So let's look at this scenario here. It's 11:30 p.m. on a clear but cold January day. Streets are dry. A 23-year-old male named Jim, he's intoxicated, operates the vehicle on a residential road, which is a 25 miles per hour speed limit. So to impress his girlfriend, who is also intoxicated, he decides to drive an 80 miles in that 25 mile per hour, drives through the stop sign and collides with another vehicle of a middle-aged couple who are killed instantly. Did Jim demonstrate utter disregard for human life? Or were his actions merely reckless? Do you think he demonstrated utter disregard for human life? What do you think? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And so as a result, it falls under involuntary manslaughter. Okay. The one-punch homicide, involuntary manslaughter, can occur in the context of a battery case, which battery will be discussed at another time, but not right now. But what we call the one-punch homicide has been used to describe an instance when a person intentionally batters, that is, punches a person, but the punch results in the death. For example, if you hit somebody, bam, and they die, it could be considered as the one-punch homicide. If you are a boxer or karate person and you use your hands, that would probably elevate the crime to murder because you're using a dangerous weapon. Okay. And so I'm not going to pull these one-punch clips, but you can look at them, and they're not really big in terms of the exam. So that involves homicide. So now we're going to talk about battery right now. So I said we were going to talk about another lecture. Well, actually, we're talking about it in this lecture because they moved it around and put it in this lecture. According to the FBI, one of the most commonly committed violent offenses is battery. And the reason is because of what battery is. And battery is a misdemeanor, simple battery, that is. And is typically charged when one intends to batter another and causes minor injury. And notice the elements of battery. Now, I want to say this to you right now, and you're going to see this in a minute. Be very careful about this. You will see assault used in some jurisdictions for battery. However, that's kind of misleading because a battery involves injury to another without consent, and it's an intentional act. In other words, you have to make contact. That's a battery. An assault is you maybe shooting at them, throwing something at them, swinging at them, or we just talk about regular battery, using your hands, kicking something, and you miss them. That's an assault. But an assault is when we are placed in apprehension of receiving a battery. But you're going to see in just a few minutes, and I really don't like this, but it depends on your jurisdiction. Excuse me. In our jurisdiction, it is pretty clear which one is which. As it says here, in some states, battery may be referred to as assault, such as Utah, and the same as battery. But remember, for purposes of understanding the process of what the difference between the two is that usually an assault can precede a battery, but it doesn't have to, because in order to deal with assault, let's just go into it right here. Creates the reasonable belief that you may be harmed. Involves no physical contact. Okay? Unless assault is defined as a battery. Forget that second part. So the point of the matter is generally held that assault involves no physical contact, but apprehension of it. Now, if a person sneaks up behind a person and they clock them, was that assault and battery, or was that just battery? Which one? Which one? Nope. If a person, remember, assault creates a reasonable belief that harm may occur. But if a person comes up behind you and does it, you might not know that person is doing it. Okay? So you're not going to really be placed in fear of receiving a battery. That's why I asked that question. So answer is it would end up being nope, it would end up being battery. Again, see, you went for the thing that I said be careful of. Do not try to use the words assault, especially when taking these tests, for battery. They are two separate things. Unless, for example, the test question might ask, in the state of Utah, and if a fact pattern in the state of Utah that a person is struck and so forth and so on, is that person guilty of whatever the offenses are? Now, chances are, in order to be fair, they should have a selection from A to D or E that says assault and battery or battery. Then that would be a correct answer. But I'm trying not to confuse you. I want you to separate the two. Assault says you don't have to hit the person or make contact. Battery, you have to make contact. When someone strikes someone against their will, involves actual physical contact. Notice up here, no physical contact unless you're dealing with that specific situation. You got it now? Okay. All right. Very important. Very important. Okay. So we're not going to spend a lot of time dealing with this issue here because, like I said again, there's aggravated battery. There's things of that nature, but basically injury to an individual. And as I said before, that it is a misdemeanor. Now, how much time do you get for a misdemeanor? What's the maximum amount of time you can get for a misdemeanor? Anybody remember? Anybody know? That's it. That's it. Less than a year. Exactly. Very good. If it goes a year and over, then it's considered as a felony. And by the way, just to refresh your memory, those of you who took corrections, jail usually is associated primarily with misdemeanors. Prison is associated with felonies because you get more in a year, so longer term. All right, let's talk about for a minute just mayhem. Mayhem is a serious type of bodily harm. As California Penal Code says, every person who unlawfully, maliciously deprives a human being of a member of their body, cuts off a limb or something, or disables or disfigures an individual, maybe using some caustic material, acid, lye, or hot water, or either may even drug them, disables the individual, puts an eye out, something like that, that's considered as mayhem. And so here's an example right here that An 18-year-old girl was at a party, 21 with a 21-year-old male, Drake, and both were high. Both were intoxicated, and as the party went on, they participated in a ritual of a cult-like man with Angela consenting and participating. And Drake slit her wrist and drank her blood. And then to clearly show their commitment to the man, Angela allowed Drake to chop her pinky finger off with a meat cleaver. That's messed up. Absent her right pinky, she eventually became lightheaded and passed out, was taken to a hospital where she told emergency room doctors what happened. And in turn, the doctors notified the police. Did Drake commit mayhem against her? And the answer is yes. Yes. Remember what it says. Unlawfully and maliciously deprives a human being. Remember, they were both high, but she didn't give consent. Okay. Battery occurs between complete strangers and even those who love each other, and dealing with domestic violence. We're going to come to that. And when you hear my story, and if you've been in another class of mine, I think, well, both of you guys, have both of you guys been in other classes that I have taught? I know Uriel has. Yeah, I know you have. And so you know the story about my position with domestic violence, with losing, and you guys, that, because Uriel, you know the story about what I mean by adversity springboard success. You know that story already. Joe, you don't, but I will be sharing that with you guys, and you'll learn a lot about me concerning that. So anyway, I think domestic violence and then sexual assault, we're going to go through these pretty fast because I want to get you out of here on time. So domestic violence basically involves a situation where violence happens either with someone who lives together. They don't have to be married, but if or they have a child and not necessarily live together. And it says generally here that it occurs between adults who are 18 years or older who either live together, have lived together, or have a child. And so therefore, in paternity cases, I've seen domestic violence alleged in cases where ex-boyfriends. I've seen domestic violence alleged when ex-husbands or ex-wives involves it. And it can take the form of sexual assault and things like that. My parents were both killed in domestic violence relationships. And so I'm very, 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 very focused on that. I've done panel discussions and so forth about this. But from a domestic violence perspective, in most states contain these elements, and these are what you need to be aware of. 2 adults, at least 18 years old. Now, do the adults have to be male and female, or can they be 2 males or 2 females? That's right. Now, and who have lived together or have a child in common. Say, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Put the brakes on it, Professor. If there are 2 guys or 2 gals, how do they have a child in common? Anybody know the answer to that question? Yep. Right on. Right on. Right on. That is exactly correct. That is how it happens. So the 2 adults, at least 18 years old, who live or have lived together, or listen, see, they don't even have to have lived together, but if they have a child in common, then in that case, and then a violent offense happens, it is considered as domestic. Okay, and I'm going to move from there because that's pretty much the summary of what you really need to be aware of. Let's talk about the final topic: sex assault crimes. Sexual assault doesn't require actual intercourse, but unlawful touching of the private area or genital area of an individual with an object or any other base. And no means no. No means no. It is not. Oh, they really didn't mean it. No. Or they went on with the action. If the word no came up, it meant no. Stop means stop. Okay. And if you go beyond that, then you're going to put yourself in a position of a sexual assault. Now, sexual assault in many jurisdictions involves various degrees, first, second, or third degree. And you reach the stage that the younger the person, the more of the degree, the higher the degree. Okay. And or the actions that are undertaken dealing with individuals could be dealt with and set up in the form of what we call statutory rape, where it is a strict liability law, which means that there's no defense to it, that you thought that person looked mature enough, not an adequate defense. And then you can come down here and you deal with different degrees depending on jurisdictions. So you can go on all the way down, but then you get down here to statutory rape, where intercourse occurs between juveniles, and then it varies from state to state, and the actual age of consent, excuse me, and the age gap makes it illegal for certain acts if they are a number of years apart. For example, in some states, as they say, such as Alabama, it may be legal for two 17-year-olds to engage in consensual sexual contact, but it would be illegal for a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old because of their gap and so forth. Okay. It is, as I said, a strict liability law. They don't require intent, but the mere engaging of the act, specifically that violates the statute as it's set out in the jurisdiction. A minor cannot consent, people. And then because of the issue of dealing with rape cases, the law has enacted what we call rape shield laws. And the reason for rape shield laws is to encourage rape victims to come forth. And prior to rape shield laws, it is unfortunate what I'm about to say, but it was true, that individuals who were victims, they were grilled over as much as a defendant might be in cross-examination by a prosecution. So prior sexual conduct or relationships were able to be brought up in court. And so now with the rape shield laws, you're not going to be able to bring that information up, which I think is the correct thing. I didn't do rape cases, and I didn't do domestic violence cases for obvious reasons. But rape cases I could not do. I have 8 sisters and no brothers. I have 6 daughters and 2 sons, and it would be a bad thing. I did one rape case, and it was against a young man who, and I didn't do a jury. I did a bench trial. He was trying to get away from his ex-girlfriend and get back to his wife, and she cried rape. And so I defended him successfully. And the female judge, she totally understood what was going on and dismissed the charges. So anyway, these are crimes against persons. So all the way from homicide to dealing with battery, assault, to dealing with domestic violence, and finally dealing with sexual assault. Okay. So in order to prepare for this quiz, it's at 9:30 now, but give me a few minutes. I just want to help you out here. Is click on the key terms, use the flashcards. I'm going to show you why I said use the flashcards. If you click glossary, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Okay. You can use it, but it explains to you the meanings. So you can do that if you want. Okay. And you can go all the way across, across to whatever the letters are, battery, coercion. You can do that if you want. However, you can do pick a letter. The intentional causing of death of one human by another without premeditation, forethought, or planning, and you can do that as well. But the one I think that would probably, or you could do fill in the blank. Okay, established when two adults, 18 years or over, live together, have lived together, or have a child in common. What should the answer be in here? What is it? What's the answer? Nobody knows? And there it is. Yeah. No, it's domestic violence. Okay. So it's V-I-O, see, but that's it. Domestic violence is the answer. Okay, so you can use that. I don't recommend those. These are what I recommend that will help you prepare. Physical pain or injury, illness or any impairment or physical conduct. And you flip it over and it tells you bodily harm. The unlawful, malicious depravity upon the body of a human being that results in disabling, disfiguring, or renders useless, or cuts or disables the tongue, or puts out an eye is called what? Mayhem. So you can do those. I recommend that as a better method of preparing. So you go to the next section, but you gotta get these quick. You can't delay because you're gonna have that same issue when you take the test. Remember. All right. Practice for special circumstances. Remember we talked about those. So I'm gonna see how you come with this. I want one of you to tell me. Phil and Jane have been married for 10 years. They have 2 children. Jane also has a drinking problem. Jane comes home drunk, argues with Phil. Phil threatens to leave Jane and take the children. Enraged Jane shoots Phil and flees the house with her children. What special circumstances would she probably argue? Which one? The first one, the second one, the third one, or the fourth one? Which one? Future dangerousness? How about adequate provocation? Remember, what she's arguing is that this is why she did it. She didn't do it because of that. He threatened to leave and take the kids. So it's not future dangerous. It's adequate provocation because she was upset because it happened. We do one more. Mary and John have been married for 15 years. Mary discovers that John has been having an affair for the past year. They both argue and sleep in separate beds that night. In the middle of the night, very upset, Mary stabs John once with a knife while he's asleep. John survives, and Mary tells the police she couldn't control herself. What would she likely say? First one, second one, third one, or fourth one? You keep saying future dangerousness. Was it necessary for her to do that? Okay. How about the same thing, adequate provocation? Because she was upset. You got to be careful. Okay. Anyway, that shows you how you can get tricked. All right. Yeah, you got to, but you got to remember, you don't get to practice on the test. All right. And you got to see. And what I usually try to tell students is not only seek to get the answer, but ask yourself as you examine it, why. You won't have enough time to do all of that when you, I skipped over one. I want to, before I do the practice quiz, I want to go back. I skipped over one because it's also important for the test. Homicide classifications. Remember, we talked about what those are. Frank has a long-standing hatred for Kim. He buys a handgun, hides behind the bushes. When Kim exits, he shoots and kills her. What is this? Yep, you are absolutely on it there. That is correct, because he premeditated. One more. John is a gang member who's involved in an ongoing battle for drug sales turf. John tells his other gang members that he's going to kill Jose. John leaves armed with a handgun and kills Jose. What classification applies? Yep. And the reason being is because of what it's going to tell you when you get this answer. And that is he intentionally did it. Remember, he said it. He opened his mouth. That's usually I used to tell my clients. I say, your mouth can send you to prison. Okay. All right. So now let's get out of that one. Okay. Let me move. Okay. Let's go back to the last one. And this is the practice quiz. Extremely. Did y'all hear the word extremely? Important. Okay. Because these are questions that are taken from the tests in some form or another. The intent to cause death with premeditation is what type of murder? Yes, that word. A father comes home to find his daughter's 17-year-old boyfriend, whom he don't like, about to have intercourse with his 17-year-old daughter. Outraged and out of control, the father kills the boyfriend. What is he likely to claim? Okay. Would it be involuntary manslaughter, though? I heard your answer. Would it be involuntary manslaughter? No, it would be voluntary manslaughter. But you're right. It is adequate provocation. Remember, thinking about involuntary manslaughter, start to think about car cases, pretty much. Last one I'll do. John, 18 years old, and Jack, 19-year-old, decide to drag race on a busy roadway. During the illegal act of racing on a highway, John drove through a red light at a high rate of speed and killed another motorist. The most likely criminal charge that John will face is what? There we go. There we go. That's exactly right. You got it. Now you got it. Now you got it. Reckless actions. Okay. So those are the issues that are involved. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to give you a key phrase because I've held you a little longer, but the reason I held you is because I wanted to help you guys out with that. I could have ended it without that, but remember, you got a quiz coming up. So here's the key phrase. What do you guys think I'm going to say? Nope. Joe, any guesses? Very good. Somebody said, who did this? Okay, you said, Uriel said domestic, and you are absolutely right. So it is domestic violence. That is it. You give me that, and you get your words. You get your points for the week. Well, I'm going to say good night to you guys. Wish you guys a happy Thanksgiving for you and your family. Get your assignments done. Stay safe. As for me and my house, we're sheltering in place. We're not having nobody over. I have a daughter who doesn't live with me. She don't live with me anymore, and she can't come over because she likes to hang out. So it's just us in the house. 4 of us and a dog, and that's it. And so stay safe. Do what you got to do, and enjoy your time. If I'm going to reach out to my other kids, it's going to be through Zoom. That's how we'll do it. and so enjoy, and I'm going to say good night to you guys. See you next week at the same time, 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Good night.